I was born a racist. I was born in segregated Atlanta, Georgia, where we had a governor who was a white supremacist, Governor Lester Maddox, who is famous for getting pickaxes and going around and knocking people in the head if they didn't agree with him. He was the governor who also decided not to allow segregation in his restaurant, the Pickrick Cafe. He actually decided to close it instead of allowing blacks into the restaurant. My grandfather was my role model. He taught me his language, the language of hate, the language of racism. He taught me words that today you don't hear, which is probably a good thing. He taught me words to describe the other races, the black race primarily, that made the N-word seem pale. That was the environment that I was raised in. My grandfather, a good man, but it was a different time back then. I was raised and born an alcoholic. My mother got married to Otto, moved us to Connecticut. My earliest childhood memories from 4 years old or younger was the trip to Barry's Bar and Grill. I still remember going into Barry's, this dark wood paneled facility. The lights were on. It was early in the morning. As my stepfather, Otto, sat up at the bar and I'm playing around the bar. He's drinking at 10 in the morning. Not necessarily the greatest place for a child of 3 to 4 years old to be raised. But I also remember during that time, my mother in tears in the freezing day or nights, crying on the phone when the power went out because Otto spent more money on his alcohol than he did on the utilities. As I grew, my mother married Sam, my third, or technically my fourth father, because I haven't mentioned my birth father, who I didn't know at that time because my birth father had actually left my mother and I before I was born. My birth father continued to be an absent father, and I guess I was born to be an absent father. I remember when I was older, 16, I had to go to the dentist and get some teeth work done. And my mother didn't have insurance. I didn't have insurance. I was just 16. So we called my father at his work, and I'm out there in the dentist office listening, and the dentist goes, "He just said you weren't his son." I said, "Oh, okay, that's fine, whatever." So he let me go. And I recall another instance when I was in my 20s, I'd burned my arm and was in the hospital. And while I was there, I needed money to get out of the hospital, just $25. So they called my father, who was on the emergency report, and again, he denied being my father. But talking about Sam, my mother married Sam, and I was born to be a child abuser and a wife abuser. Because that's what I lived with Sam. I remember those many days when he would be angry because I did not do what I was supposed to do. And I remember him taking his belt off. And I remember him whipping me across the back, across the legs, everywhere, with a much wider and thicker belt than I'm wearing today. I remember growing up with that. I left home not long after that, when I was a teenager. Found out from my grandmother that I was born a murderer. Sam had actually killed his first wife, shot her dead in a car, and dumped her out on the street. I am not a racist. Quite the opposite. I am not an absent father. I raised my children till they're currently my best friends. I am not an alcoholic. I am not a murderer. The sins of our fathers do not have to be our sins. We do not have to agree or become what our fathers were. I saw the movie The Black Panther this weekend, and one of the great parts of that, the new king of Wakanda learned that his father, the former king, had actually killed his brother in an argument and abandoned his brother's child there. And he was really troubled with the fact that he was the son of the king who had done that, and that he was just like that. He was that kind of king. And his girlfriend told him, "You are not your father's king. You are your own king." So the sins of our fathers should not weigh on us, and you should not let that rule your life, because your fathers are not your king. You are your own king. Rule your life as you want it. Madam Toastmaster.